What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to A Therapeutic Edge. Today on the table in front of us is not a new knife, although it is new to my collection. This is the ZT-0200. Now, many years ago, I began my sort of knife journey with this. This is the ZT-0350. This is a slightly smaller version of this, which is the ZT-0300. These are designed by Ken Onion. This one was designed by Ken Onion with a little Mick Strider mixed into the mix. I bought this one, and since then, of course, I have put different scales on it and a different pocket clip and so on and so forth to make it more my own. But this is the knife that showed me what a knife could be. Now, even after this, there were a lot of Kershaw and other inexpensive knives. But it started a process that when I really began to collect knives, I made it a point to get one of these. And my first one was the ZT-0303, which is a slightly later model in Tiger Stripe, because I love these classic hard-use overbuilt ZT knives. But the one that I was unable to get my hands on for the longest time, because they are hard to come by, was this. The 0200. Now, both of these are assisted and in S30V steel. This one is not assisted. They did not come that way. And it is in 154 cm steel, which is not, well, S30V is a little better, but here's the thing. I love this knife. Now, you may have noticed that this has got bronze hardware on it. That's actually an aftermarket affect that the previous owner did. But the nice thing about zero tolerance is that sitting over here to my left is an envelope with all replacement hardware, all the screws, the pivot screw, all of it. I can put this thing back to stock anytime I want, and it was free. Now, you can see the lineage if you hold these together. The 300 is a little thicker. Has a slightly taller blade, but they have very similar design aesthetics. This, of course, is a frame lock, where the ZT-0200 is a liner lock. Look, this is a fantastic pocket knife. I cannot recommend that you go out and get one, because they're very hard to find. But as an addition to my collection, I am really happy to have this thing. It is a big knife. It is a big, comfortable knife. Ken Onion definitely had an aesthetic in his mind when he created these. And together, they are, well, they're the beginning of ZT. From these knives came everything else. These are the knives that people talk about when they talk about hard-use ZT knives. Now, the 0350, a little less so. The interesting thing, of course, is that the 0350 is also a liner lock. And so what you have, well, so these two knives came out in 2005, 6, something like that. So 14, 15 years ago. Down the road a little ways, they decided to make a slightly smaller version. Now, what they say is that the 0350 is 10% of the 0300. But what they clearly did was take elements of the 200 and merge it with the 300 to come up with the 350. Collecting knives is a funny thing. There is no real end game, but every once in a while you get it in your head, a hankering as it were, to finish a collection. And this finishes my big ZT collection. It really does. Now, recently, my reach, I picked this up. This is the new 308, which is supposed to be in the same family. And then you can see why they would say that, of course. But this one is moving on. Now, I love this knife. It is well made. It is beautiful. It is in CPM 20 CV steel. It is running on bearings. This is an excellent pocket knife. But I like these better. I love this knife. I love this knife. And I am rapidly coming to love this thing. Now, am I going to put the original black hardware on there? I don't know. You see, this is titanium. This hardware that somebody put on there. And so it is bronze anode titanium. And I got to tell you, I think that's kind of a cool feature. The inside of these liners, these big, thick liners, have been milled out to give this knife just a little less weight. The blade itself has the same recurve as the 300, but it is a steeper recurve. It is a longer, narrower, and more pointy blade, much more suited, of course, to hammer grip, if that's your thing. Do I wish they'd remake this? Yeah, absolutely. I think these would sell like crazy if they were really serious about it. All of these. They do release the 300, or at least the 300, 303, 302, 301 series periodically. Finishing a segment of your collection is always a strange feeling. I actually got one of these once before, and it was really beat up. The person that I bought it from was, I'm not going to say dishonest, but certainly wasn't as upfront about the amount of damage on the knife as I had been led to believe. And so I essentially got rid of it, which was really disappointing. But now, thanks to a web shop in Canada called The Sharper the Better Knives, I got this one. This one is perfect. It is new old stock, which means that with the exception of the modification of the screws, this thing is brand new. And that makes it considerably even more hard to come by. Let's do some size comparisons so we know what we're looking at. I mean, we've already compared it against its siblings, but let's put it up against our old friend, the Rat Model 1. As you can see, the 0200 is very similar in length to the Rat Model 1. You get considerably more cutting surface, and it is overall about 1/8 of an inch longer. Here it is against the Bug Out. And as you can see, it is considerably bigger than the Bug Out. The ZT-0200 is a big knife. It just is. It's, I don't know. The thing about collecting knives is that they're not always for a specific purpose. Sometimes we just want one. This is that kind of a knife. Now, to be fair, this originally came with a clip that looked much more... No. I guess I don't have one of the stock clips around here anymore. This is not a stock clip. This is a slightly longer and narrower clip that, believe it or not, because of the way it's shaped, allows for slightly more deep carry. But as you can see, there's not a lot of knife sticking out of the top there. It's thick. It is thick through the handle. It certainly is. But man, if you're going to buy a knife designed specifically to beat the crap out of, that is supposed to serve you in any conditions, be it in a service job, police or fire, military, civilian applications like camping or outdoor stuff, the whole ZT heavy-duty line from about 15 years ago is just so hard to beat. Now, do I wish this thing was in a super steel and it upgraded this or upgraded that? Sure. But I don't care. Not really. I bought this knife because of what it represents. Now, you can find online, this is about 50% lockup, there was a generation of these that would come loose at the lock, and that was part of the ZT lock bar issue that made the rounds a number of years ago. I have had zero problems with my zero tolerance. This thing does not want to close unless I tell it to. So I don't know. Maybe it was by piece. This one has no problems. Some might have. I have no complaints. Let's go ahead and get some measurements out of the way while we're looking at it. By the way, this has two forms of deployment. It's got this nice subtle flipper back here and thumb studs that work every single time. Now on the 300 series, the thumb studs are actually the blade stops. On the 200 series here, that is not the case. They are, well, they're just straight up thumb studs and more for aesthetics, I think. They do run a little bit into the cutting path back here. But because of this recurve, if you keep your cutting material at the apex of the recurve, right here, then there's nothing in the way of the cutting path. And that's the thing about a recurve like that. When you're pushing through material, it tends to keep the material centered. And so these are not an issue in that way. But it's something to think about, I suppose. Let's do the handle first, because I said this is a thick boy. At its thickest point, it is 0.7 of an inch. So almost 3/4 of an inch through the handle. It is a big, thick knife right through here, for sure. The result, of course, is that when you are holding on to this thing, man, it is not going anywhere. Oh, man, you can really lock onto this. And this shape. Now, you guys know that I actually sort of prefer more rectangular handles. I thought perhaps this was going to be kind of a problem. But I don't know if Ken Onion and I have the same size hand or what. But this thing, it's like it was made for me. Just absolutely made for me. Let's go ahead and do the blade thickness while we are sitting here. How much 154 cm do you get? Back here at the thickest point, you get 3.99 mil, just at 4 millimeters of 154 cm blade steel. The edge that they put on this thing is nice and even, all up through the recurve and up around the belly, up to the tip. My understanding is this is a factory edge, and I gotta say, they did a fine job at the factory. There's a little tiny sharpening choil down here, but no smile. At the back of the plunge, this thing comes to a very, very sharp edge. It doesn't get wider back here, which is really nice. The overall dimensions of our new friend here, you get 1, 2, 3, and almost 4 full inches of cutting on, depending on where you measure, either 4 inches or 3 1/4 inches of 154 cm steel. I love that because it allows you to have more cutting than there is blade, which is very cool. The overall knife is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 3/4 inches long. From just behind that flipper tab, digging into that choil, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, just under 4 inches, 3 and 3, yeah, about 3 3/4 of an inch of internal area. As you can see, my finger comes to right here at the very beginning of this swell, which is really very nice. I like that it's not assisted like its brothers. And yet the action is very, very good. And again, this is a new old knife. This has not been flipped or played with too much. It will break in. It is running on phosphor bronze washers, which means over time that is going to get ever smoother. And by the way, in the replacement hardware kit that I got from ZT were replacement washers. So should they wear out, I already have backups, which I think is really, really very cool. When people say hard use knives, they might be talking about Striders, they might be talking about lots of things. But because of how old I am and what introduced me to knives in the first place, at least more than just kind of big 5-level budget pocket knives, when people say hard use knives, this is what I think of. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the ZT-0200, a really nice addition to my collection and a very nice knife overall. I have been a Therapeutic Edge. You have been my amazing audience. If you have any questions about this series of ZT knives or any of the knives you've ever seen on the channel, feel free to ask down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.